So every family office is getting the same memo right now. We need to invest more in AI. But when you open your inbox tomorrow morning and see three different AI investment opportunities, how do you even begin to evaluate? We're joined with three experts from Deep Venture Partners: Ben Kaplan, Daniel Hoffer, Luke Vincent, who could help us answer questions like these. Ben, you've called this moment the new renaissance driven by AI. Walk us through what makes 2025 specifically a tipping point, and more importantly, why are family offices uniquely positioned to win?
Well, great. Well, first of all, Amanda, thanks for having us as part of your webinar. It's incredibly exciting to me because I think AI is an accelerant in all other types of science that we track. So the great part about it is if we sort of said, hey, we had the secret sauce that's going to make all of your scientists more productive, all of your technology work better and faster, and it's going to impact all of these areas of science. You say, what is the secret sauce? How do I buy it? How do I get it? And the great thing is it's actually here. And I think what's notable for right now in terms of this renaissance is a couple of things. I mean, one, we sort of have these foundational models when people hear about whether it's, GPT or Claude or Llama or Grok that have all become like tools in our toolkit. So one, it's very easy to have that toolkit now. Anyone can have it. And then two, we're at this sort of infrastructure build out phase. And what I mean by that is that it's opportunities because we're sort of getting ready for scale. So we need, not just in chips and cloud, but power generation and cooling systems and material science and the physical infrastructure to enable an AI at scale in greater capacity is happening now. So those two things are happening. And at the same time, we have 80% of the Fortune 500 is already heavily invested in AI. 40% of all businesses are doing it. So the sort of barrier to buy-in is being removed. And so I feel like, and Dan or Luke, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, but I feel like this is like, the internet revolution in the mid 1990s for where we're at now. Meaning a lot is happening. It's exciting, but obviously if you could have like invested in internet companies in the middle to late, 90s, and stuck with it and didn't get scared away by the bubble or anything like that, you would have been in great shape. So that's why I feel like this is an incredibly exciting time. And we're at the beginning of the renaissance right now. I don't know, Dan or Luke, what are you guys most excited about?
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in maybe. I think all the ingredients are here. As you said, the infrastructures is here, the foundation models are here. I would say all the tooling is here as well that makes, all the engineers and anybody incredibly productive, right? We can do a lot more with less. So, and there are still a whole bunch of domains, of business areas where, AI hasn't really made a big impact yet, hasn't really accelerated, business yet. So there are zillions of opportunities, and it's up to new people, new startups, new entrepreneurs to capture them, and we're here to help, right?
I 100% agree with Ben's comment about how this resembles the 1990s with regard to the internet. This is absolutely as big as the internet because we are seeing dramatic transformation across all industries and all applications in the same way that the internet has enabled over the decades. And now, obviously, there was a lot of wealth generated during the 1990s. Of course, there was a big bubble as well. But that underlying technology, the internet technology, has enabled decades of further innovation on top of it. So the bubble came and went, and a lot of people did very well during that bubble. But the fact is, the underlying technology has enabled many subsequent rounds of innovation and wealth generation for decades to come. And AI will be the same. We are living in an interesting time right now with regard to AI, and it's just going to keep building on itself, and frankly, faster than any technology has ever built on itself before, because the computers are leveraging their own intelligence to get smarter, faster and faster. And that's really unique with regard to this transformation that we haven't seen before.
Well, and just to give you a sense, Amanda, and those listening, of adoption rate, I mean, of things that adopt very fast. Like, okay, if we look at what are like Instagram was one of the fastest companies for creating, $1 billion company with a small, it took them about 2.5 years to get to 1 million users. TikTok TikTok was faster. TikTok came around, people started using it, they loved it. It was built for virality. It took 9 months. So ChatGPT was 100 million users in 60 days. So just it's following the model we've seen before, but everything is accelerated also as well, number one. And then two, I think to your other part of your question, which was just about what does this mean for family offices? Where do family offices have an advantage? I think there's a couple things. I think one is that, if family office money at times can be patient capital, more patient than others, there's an opportunity in a lot of areas where, if you just have a 3 to 5 year time horizon, it's going to take a little bit longer than that, but not necessarily much longer if you're in that sort of 6 to 10 year range. And also because there's been this sort of and this is part of our thesis for our fund, which is that there's been a consolidation in venture capital. A lot of money has gone into the really, really big funds. Well, the issue is those really, really big funds, if some of the greatest opportunities are, and Dan, feel free to jump in on this, pre-seed, seed stage, very early on, where the checks are small. They're too small for the really big funds. But for family offices, you can get meaningful stake in world-changing disruptive technology early on. And that concentration, if you can get to it first, it's just too small of an opportunity for some of those really huge, massive funds. I don't know if you have comments on that, Dan, or what you think of sort of why we're so focused on pre-seed and seed right now in this sort of AI world.
Yeah, it's basic math. I mean, there are a lot of great big funds out there, but the fact is there's a ton of data that shows that the best performance in startups and also in venture funds are kind of the smaller emerging funds where folks are really hungry and they're tracking every dollar invested. It really means something. If you've got a $5 billion fund, you're not writing a $5 million check with a lot of attention to it. It's kind of a drop in the bucket. You're really playing for the opportunity to invest much larger down the road. You're trying to secure your pro rata so that you can do that. A small fund that invests in the very earliest stages is tracking every dollar and trying to get in early. And that's where it's basic math. That's where the exponential returns can come from. If you're investing, hypothetically at a $1 million valuation, which is low, but possible. We've done it before. And, just going from one to, $1 billion is different than investing already at a late stage and hoping for similar returns.
Yeah, so that's a lot of opportunity in early stage, specifically for family offices.
Yeah. So I have a question for you guys. In terms of when you're thinking about, AI, there's so much money pouring into AI, but not everything is going to be a winner, right? There's probably more losers than winners. What is jumping into the question we have around kind of what are the unique characteristics that people should be looking at? Should people be evaluating these opportunities? I think that would be really helpful for this audience.
Sure. I mean, a couple of things, just like base things, which I think are principles that we have for any investment we do, but are particularly important with AI. I mean, number one, does this company have either proprietary data access or breakthrough science that will compound over time? I mean, I think what we've discovered in the AI space is that, using these kind of models, you can burn through money. I mean, you can burn through money quickly. So we want to see an advantage that compounds over time, that improves. And so that's either and this is why we'll get into universities, why universities have an advantage. If you have, through your university, access to a proprietary data set that other people don't have because you've been working in that space a long time, that's an advantage. And two, is there some kind of other breakthrough science that you just have access to that makes it a unique opportunity and particularly gives you an edge over the foundational models that just continue to get better and better? I think second, what is the moat around that? So I think we've sort of said, what is the technical moat? So can other people duplicate you? If you have a measure of success, is it easy to do? That's another place where I think universities have an opportunity, because some of that university research has been funded by, millions, $1 billion of federal grants that have gone into this over time that you've built upon over a series of time. So what is that technical moat? Is it easy to duplicate? And then three, I think, and then we'll look at some of the edge cases, is that does the founding team, I mean, yes, they have domain expertise, but do they have commercial instincts as well? I think one of the big things when you go from deep tech research, initially you're thinking, well, okay, it's for the love of the research and the passion for it and trying to uncover it. But at a certain point to commercialize this stuff, like Amanda, you know this, it's like you have to think about customers, right? Like, what does my customer want? And so you need a technical team that has commercial instincts, either because of the composition of their team or a really unusual founders who have the propensity for that. So Dan and Luke, what are other things? I think those are three top things, but what are other things that you think you look for in this process?
Let me part on that. I think the first thing that I would say that I agree with you, when you're looking at very early stage companies, the team matters a lot. And whether it's in AI or in anything, any field, right, the team is critical. So where's the team? What's their background? Do they have the right blend of sort of commercial, savvy as well as sort of deep technology, expertise? That's one. The other one is the data. I think you're absolutely right that, data, in the age of AI matters a lot, and having access to data, not just data now, but maybe a flywheel that will bring you more and more data to help you keep improving over time is very, very critical, right? And that data can be, in fact, access. You can build a business model where, as a byproduct of your business, you acquire more data that helps you build and strengthen the model over time. So I think there's a lot to be said there. And then on the model innovation, I think I'm especially excited in the space of, let's say, call this physical AI, where we'll see innovation that has to do with multimodality. So models that are able to use not just video or text, but maybe other modalities that then can create some sort of disruptive engine here to power the startup to new levels. So these are thoughts on the space. Dan, back to you.
Yeah, so I think the concept of defensibility in investing is a fascinating one, because there are different ways to look at it. Some people say that the only real defensibility is speed of execution. That's one way to look at it. Data moats is another way to look at it. Both Ben and Luke talked about what is in effect network effects. Where you get a business gets more valuable as more customers get involved with it and start to use it, or as more data gets ingested into the platform. And network effects are a core driver of massive valuation and massive value as a business grows. So there are many ways to look at the drivers of value and also core aspects of defensibility. But one thing I would just note that I remember back in and of course I'm dating myself here, but I remember back in the 1990s and Web 1.0, people said that with the internet, all the rules of business are broken. And there were a lot of people that believed it back then. Of course, that wasn't the case. And even today, it's tempting to say that with AI, the rules of business are broken. And that's not the case today either. So I think the core rules of business are things like, obviously rapid growth, defensibility, customer satisfaction, profits, things like that. And you can absolutely take on risks to defer some of those things in the short term. Maybe you invest heavily without profits in the short term, for example. But at the end of the day, the core tenets of business apply to every investment opportunity and every eventual outcome. And so that you need to be cognizant of some of those fundamental principles while also thinking creatively and aggressively to maximize shareholder value.
Daniel, that's really interesting because, with what you're saying, AI adoption, I mean, there are people, how many people are being laid off because of AI taking over? It's just like, it reminds me of, like, remember Office Space. Oh, now we all need to have, get rid of the offices. Everyone needs to be in cubicles. And then now, so I'm always like, where does the pendulum swing? And then it swings a little bit back over. So where does it land?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think actually if I could jump in, I think one thing that's really interesting now is that when we look at studies of AI, what it's contributing. I mean, you were talking about the labor market. If we just look at like contributor to like, we'll take a U.S. focused approach, but like U.S. GDP. I mean, the estimates I've seen is that it's contributing about, over 1%, like 1.1% to overall, GDP in the U.S. And this past year was contributed by AI. If you basically what that means is, I mean, how much did the U.S. economy grow? Grew about 1%. So if you take that away, we're basically flat. Like AI right now is the driver of growth across the entire economy, and it's early stages. And that's why it's exciting, but also you have to understand that, we're in this scale up phase, and it's so closely tied to productivity of workers that if you believe that productivity of workers and making your workers more productive will unlock business value, I think all three of us on our side do, then you have this productivity accelerant in the short term. In the longer term, it's like a hugely disruptive technological factor. But even in the short term, that productivity enhancer is so tied in with the economy now. It is the driver of the economy.
And it will compound.
That's right.
I totally agree. So let's go back to this. Ben, you talked about this engine, right, at the universities. There's this massive engine of AI innovation happening there, and now that's kind of accelerating commercialization of research across every field. Why should family offices care about what's coming out of university labs?
Well, I think the first thing to do to just understand it, is I think there's sort of this sense of university labs are important, but like, how important are they? And let me just give you a sense of companies that you may not realize spun out of university. So people always cite Google, which of course came out of Stanford, more recently Moderna for COVID vaccines that, came out of University of Pennsylvania. But if I just go through the list, like Novartis, Ohio State University, Impossible Foods, synthetic biology burgers, that was from Rutgers. Other biotech companies, Evolve from Duke, let's say Netscape from University of Illinois, even ones like Lyft from Cornell, Canva from University of Western Australia. So there is first of all, there is a huge track record of just overall university spinouts perform better than your average VC-backed company. So number one, there's that history. But two, specifically with AI, what's interesting now is that basically we've put a lot of focus on ChatGPT and just, hey, you can have a conversation and it's a credible conversation. But one of, to me, the most exciting things that are happening is just AI has made every scientist more productive. And that includes a lot of, folks in research labs. And yes, we're talking about MIT and Stanford and Harvard, but not just there. Lasers at University of South Florida, or materials science at University of Oregon in Nike's birthplace, or plasma cutting, when let's not even do US, at the University of Strathclyde, in Europe. So all of these places, if we just sort of said hey, we're going to make all of our scientists smarter, faster, better, more productive. And we said, we're going to do that all at once. We said, what is the epicenter of this? Where is this happening? If we were going to say that, well, it's happening all over, but we would say universities, and then maybe, some research labs in the US, some national research labs, of course, some corporations as well. They just got everyone just got smarter and better and faster and able to recognize patterns better with more tools in their tool belt. And so ground zero, if you want to be in on early stage pre-seed or seed research, it's happening at universities, and everyone is sort of operating faster and better and smarter. So that's why it's so important. And I think, Dan, we've talked about this a ton, that MIT and Stanford and Harvard get attention. We follow them closely. We were just last week at a conference at MIT, but there is great research happening everywhere. And in fact, the hallmark of the US system in particular, but also worldwide, is that there is this diversity of talent everywhere. There's more than 1,000 great research universities. And depending on what you're interested in, if you're interested in, autonomous aircraft and sustainable jet fuel, you need to go to University of North Dakota or Mississippi State University, because they're doing innovative things. And that's exciting. It's all over the place. Dan, I know you track this.
Yeah, and we've run our own internal analysis that shows that university spinouts outperform non-university spinouts with in terms of ultimately the exit multiples and the median valuation step up between rounds and so on. So
about 19% on the average step up between rounds, a university spinout compared to a VC-backed startup is going to have about a 19% higher valuation in that step up valuation.
Yeah. So there's clear quantitative data that shows that quality companies, based on a strong foundation of university technological innovation, really outperform the market. And so that's why we believe that getting in at the earliest stages, again, it's just math. If you can go from $1 million valuation to $100 million valuation, it's a lot easier than starting at $100 million and going up 100x from there, regardless of the dilution dynamics. So getting in, finding the outperforming asset class, which is university spinouts even to begin with, and then layering on this AI layer, which is just revolutionary and making everybody smarter and more efficient. There's a ton of money to be made with that kind of opportunity, and it's actually good for the world. So, the types of things that people are solving, the types of problems that people are solving in universities are things that affect us all at some level, whether it's, climate change or microplastics or better transmission of information or all of the life sciences, cancer cures and things like that. It's good for the planet. It's good for our species. Universities are really the purest place to do the R&D that can solve the world's problems. And so there's an opportunity to do good here by investing in the technologies, especially as Ben mentioned. MIT and Stanford and Harvard. We all went to Harvard. We're aware of what the Harvard ecosystem looks like. But the fact is, there's a ton of great innovation at all these other universities, and so and they're not getting as much love from the venture capitalist community, and so there's a missed opportunity for love, and there's a missed opportunity for massive wealth generation, and that's where we step in, because we want to give them the attention that they deserve, because they're doing amazing work, and we also want to help the planet in that way, and make a ton of money in the process.
Well, and Amanda, just for your audience, one stat when I saw it that kind of blew my mind. So, like, basically, if you look at like research in the U.S., like 100 years ago, basically beginning of the prior century, the U.S. was not a leader in any technological area, right? 100 years later, now about 125 years later, the U.S. is a leader in basically every technological area. And the question is, what happened during that time? How do we go from like nothing to being the leader in pretty much everything? And it was this huge investment in universities, training of scientists, and research. And what that meant for the US quality of life, like if you would have gone back to, I'm trying to think how many great grandparents that is, but to go back like at least a great grandparent, something like that. Basically, our standard of living is 18 times higher than what it was at the beginning of the century. So we're living 18 times better through that transformation, through technology. The US led the way because of this huge, unprecedented investment in universities, education, research, some of the national laboratories, and it transformed the US. It transformed our standard of living. Now, what has happened? Lots of other places have jumped on the bandwagon, as they should. So research is happening not just in the US, it's happening all over, but it is so tied to our overall standard of living, our ability to have technology lead the way. And now AI is powering all of that technology. And that's why this is the new renaissance, back to your original question, and why it's so exciting. And it's also so exciting that we have a chance to invest in it now.
Yeah. So you talked about, I mean, it sounds like universities are a breeding ground because of research, right? There's all these resources, not just in people, but also money. But now you have an issue where the federal budget, cuts, and then you also have, immigration, talent limitations coming into the United States. Not to get political, but how's that changed the investment landscape?
So I think I see it as a gift to the private sector. It's whether or not it's good for the country or the world is perhaps a different question. But the fact is that university grants and funding and government funding has traditionally been available to help nurture and incubate these technologies and these companies. And with that funding being reduced in the US or going away completely, depending on the particular situation, there are a bunch of nuances, by the way, around budget cycles and what's been committed for this year versus next year, and something has gotten repealed, and it's all somewhat complex. But the fact is, when the public sector funding gets cut, then the university startups are even more interested in private sector funding. And there's an opportunity for the private sector to step in and invest on, frankly, even more favorable terms, because we're not competing with public grant money to help fund the company. Now there is a growing opportunity internationally, and we have a global perspective. I've personally invested in companies all over the world, in past funds, especially two of which went public, one in Europe and one in the Middle East. And so and Luke is French, and so we
Makes
have
him instantly cooler and the coolest
yeah.
among Muslims, but also
That's right.
has a foothold in Europe. Yes,
Indeed.
yes,
And I have lots of French investments in that effect.
yes.
So we have a very global perspective, and part of our belief is that by taking a thesis driven approach to some of the innovations globally, we can track down some of the most compelling technologies from anywhere in the world, and we have a track record of doing that.
Well, it's really interesting, Amanda. So I was just last week. I was in Washington D.C. I was on a panel at the National Academy of Sciences. They have this sort of roundtable group. It's called the Government University Industry Philanthropy Research Roundtable. So there was lots of sessions, lots of presidents of universities and venture capitalists and philanthropists all kind of gathered talking about this. And what blew me away was that I heard the words family office mentioned, like, I don't know, maybe 10 times in various panels. And I had never heard this mentioned before. And the reason it was being mentioned was people were looking for like more creative ways to fund things, because it's no longer just like, oh yeah, we will have unlimited supplies of federal money. Of course it will be funded. There's more of a question. And there was also things being discussed like, can we fund research with crypto investments? And I heard all kinds of interesting things you'd never heard before. But specifically, family offices kept coming back. And there was this discussion about, well, this working group from the National Academy of Sciences, just this past in 2024, they added philanthropy to the list of groups that they sort of facilitate communication with. And so there's this whole thing of like, oh, maybe there's a role for philanthropic donations that support certain things, but also there's a role with investment, and how do those work together? So I think there is a willingness from universities to consider creative options like never before. And some of those options could be great investment opportunities. Some could be a chance to, make an impact through philanthropy. It could be other things, but it is an exciting time for that realization. And there is the quote that kept being said on the panel, and I'm very involved in sort of like government policy towards how we encourage research. But the quote they kept saying was, I think, the famous Winston Churchill quote, which goes something like, a crisis is like a terrible thing to waste.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Never waste a good crisis.
Or you never waste a good crisis, or something like that. Yes. And so that was being cited, and people were saying like, we're a little bit uneasy. We're worried a little bit, but at the same time, the system wasn't perfect before. This is an opportunity to remake the system.
Yeah. So this is a great opportunity, I think, for to take a moment to talk about kind of like 30,000 feet view of all the ways, people talk about AI, they think ChatGPT, whatever it might be, right? That kind of things that you might use in your everyday work. But what are it would be great if you can kind of give a landscape view of everything that's kind of going on in the AI. I know that's kind of a big ask, but it would be good to kind of give people an idea of the different things that they might not even realize is happening in AI.
Well, I think a couple just like broad things, and then others can chime in. I think number one, there is, as the foundational models have become more commoditized and easily accessible, there's this move towards like applications of AI in vertical specific spaces. And there's sort of this like real world AI trend that's coming that will be in more like controlled environments first. So a great example is, AI used for swarm robotics. Let's say we do our own podcast called Deep. We were just interviewing the robotics expert who's the dean of engineering at University of Pennsylvania on the show. And one of the things he was talking about was, robots that individually are dumb, but through AI, they can work in coordinated action to accomplish really incredible things. And in the real world, and some of the first real world applications where we've already seen progress and growth, but we're going to see more, is like, okay, a warehouse where you've got to do complex logistical tasks and you've got to manufacture things. And the difference is, I think you have AI where if you can use AI to coordinate dumb robots to do smart things, the economics of that is much better than sort of developing AI that can do really, really smart things, or robots that can do really, really smart or hard things. So one, you have this sort of verticalization. Two, you have this sort of integration of like real world AI coming. And then three, in terms of right now, I mean, I think one of the things that is interesting is that you have this notion of just productivity across all different dimensions of that it's impacting. So any sort of industry that just benefits from like immediate productivity gains has, a unprecedented opportunity right now through the power of AI. Luke, Dan, other things that you sort of see within AI right now?
Yeah, and then I would say one thing I see is that AI right now has disrupted primarily what I would call white collar jobs, right? And in fact, the space that we didn't think would be disrupted first, which is like uh, creativity, right? AI allows you to be super creative very, very quickly and very effectively in a number of fields. Whether you're media designer, whether you write, whether you recreate something, AI helps you. So that's amazing. But I think the next wave is probably going to be more, I would say like blue collar, right? So can AI disrupt, other types of jobs that are more physical? This is where I think physical AI is going to make, has an enormous opportunity ahead, right? To transform how we build things, how we drive, or not drive vehicles, how we manufacture, how we do a whole bunch of things that are inherently physical. So robotics, physical AI is the next wave, and it's going to be powered again by new foundation models that are multimodal in nature and powered by data. So I think this is like an area where we pay close attention to, that I think is going to be a very, very large opportunity for us.
Well, and I think just if you're thinking about horizons, I mean, there's sort of like different buckets to think about, just like as an investor. I think there's like sort of quick win opportunities, right? 3 to 5 year horizon. Those are basically like sort of areas where AI can already have clear revenue traction. I mean, things like legal, healthcare, financial services, where you can get sort of quicker wins there. Then there's a sort of like foundational AI infrastructure. Say that's like 5 to 8 years. That would be, um, compute infrastructure, specialized chips, developer tools, AI native databases. They take longer, but they're like, this is sort of when people talk about like the picks and shovels that go into, disruption. It's all of that, 5 to 8 years. And then beyond that, say like more transformational deep tech AI, more like 8 to 15 years, or certainly, 12 plus years is like, more like advanced materials, more really great enhancements in autonomous systems, one of Luke's areas of expertise. Drug discovery. These are ones that are like, deep tech. They take longer, but there. So really, we believe that you should have some, some quick wins. Let's have some like foundational disruption, and let's like, play for the long term that have some of the biggest returns. All three of those things kind of work together.
And just to provide some historical perspective on this, we've gone through already multiple waves of innovation with AI. So, and AI is not new technology. AI adoption is new, but the technology itself has been under development for many decades. And I think, most recently what people are tracking is the scaling and efficiency innovations around transformers that came in, probably 2018 or so, followed by, multimodality with, graphics and video and so on, which happened in the last few years. And then the ability to better follow human instructions on conversational data. And finally, the era that we're probably in right now is around agentic AI and AI using tools to better accomplish various business objectives. That's kind of where we are right now. Obviously, there are more waves to come that Luke and Ben talked about. But it's an interesting phase that we're in right now, where AI systems are talking to other AI systems, and so there's kind of this increasing potential for dialogue between AI agents and interaction, and they can just talk each other to death, basically, faster and faster and faster, have infinite conversations with each other. but I think that dynamic actually will result in the increasing importance of human interaction as well, like genuine human interaction. That's going to be another not a technological trend, but probably a societal trend that I expect to rise in the coming years as well.
Let's get tactical with the evaluation framework. An AI robotics company for warehouse automation lands on my desk tomorrow. It's raising $10 million Series A. What are the questions I absolutely need to answer before I write that check?
Well, that's a great example because I've been involved with a company like that at a previous fund, and so some of the things that we looked at was, first of all, obviously, you need to do the due diligence on the technology side, both the software and the hardware, and the ability to sense the physical environment. We want to dig into the robustness of the underlying technology and Luke, I'm sure, can talk more about this as well on the kind of robotics and geospatial piece. I'll let him speak to that in a moment. But on the business side, some of the things you also need to think about is, well, what are the costs of this technology to be sold? How much is the customer paying? How much does it disrupt human labor? In many cases, blue collar labor might cost less than the cost of the AI driven machine. And so you need to think, well, ultimately, will customers choose robotic technology when in fact they could just hire humans to do it for less? That's a fundamental business dynamic to consider from an ROI perspective. But Luke, you were talking before about physical AI technology and infrastructure. Why don't you talk about that in this context for the warehouse?
Yeah, I mean, for the warehouse specifically, I'm not sure that much to add. I think I would always looking at the data piece, because I think it's fundamental to building an amazing company that can have the network effect that we referenced earlier. That's one thing that's top of mind. I would also look at, again, the level of innovation, defensibility in the space of the model itself, right? When you talk about robotics, you often have different sensing modalities that current foundation models, multimodal, don't understand very well typically. That includes like LiDAR, for example. And so I would look at innovation in that space and where it came from. Is there a strong foundation that may be academic? That's something that we would also, of course, be looking at. So these are examples of things that would be, paying attention to, right?
And then just in terms of just like things to look for that are red flags that sort of, set off maybe a warning light. I mean, a couple of things in terms of like, one, always want to see founders who can explain complex technology in simple terms, just like an understanding of it, and not this sort of like black box mentality, like, oh, yeah, all this stuff happens. Oh, it's really complex. Oh, it's proprietary. Like you want to be able to like have them articulate it. I think when you understand it well, you can articulate it. I think, in lots of deep technology areas, there's sort of this like scale from demo to production deployment. Can we see a credible path? So one of the big things is like, let's say it's some kind of material. So it's like, yeah, you can make a gram of it, but what's involved in making, a kilogram of it? Like do the same principles apply? In this particular example, it could be, how do you go from, yes, you can make it this work, this limited scale. You can make one robot work, or you can make this like, very hands-on example work, but can it work when this gets a lot more complex? So is there like a credible path to sort of scale? And then also, I think one of the things that when you're dealing with scientists that is underrated, we've talked a lot about this, is just like the entrepreneurial nature of the scientist. And sometimes they're an academic, but there's like signs of being more entrepreneurial than otherwise. Meaning, like, are they a risk taker in their career? Were they like always doing one thing that was the only thing they were doing and they just doubled down on it? Or were they willing to try other things, experiment with this, others, even if it might have been a little further out their comfort zone? So I think you want to see entrepreneurial ability, because that entrepreneurial ability, even in, scientists that are very, very domain specialized, that allows them to see other options, pivot to where there's opportunity, adjust to customers. And that is like sort of this counterbalancing factor with the deep technical experience. So can they explain their stuff well? Is there a credible path to scale? And do they have entrepreneurial instincts, even if they've worked a long time in a particular scientific discipline?
And but to maybe double down on the path to scale, I'd say in robotics, especially, I would look at the what's called the ODD, or the operational design domain, and how it can scale. Right. I mean, it's very easy in robotics to make something work for something very narrow and specific. Right. And there you can use typical, traditional methods, rule-based systems. Right. But scaling that to a very complex domain where you have, let's say, to take an example, autonomous driving, you can make that work very easily, in a known loop that has only right turns and maybe in a suburban environment. But scaling that to working in every major city in the US, for example, is a whole different ball game. So is the approach, going to scale? How we see AI use? Is AI a bunch of different subsystems that are talking to each other, which is difficult to scale, or is this more of an end-to-end approach that is fed by data? These are the things that we'd be looking at to understand whether the technology will actually scale and become, massively successful. So.
And of course, there are always all the basic things you need to track. You need to do due diligence on the team, the back channel references. You need to evaluate the cap table. You need to do the competitive analysis. You need to do the market sizing. There's a long laundry list of things you go through for any investment. It feels like 100 things. It's like you're choosing a spouse with each investment.
And of course, even more so now, even macroeconomic factors, macroeconomic risks, tariffs, geopolitics, all of that is sort of assessed before we make an investment.
Yeah, and supply chain as well. If it's a hardware company, things like that.
Yeah. It's I was a non-consultant on a team full of consultants, and I always said they're selling the dream, but I'm always like, but is it executable, right? Is it scalable? Like what Tuluk said, it totally resonates with me. So for family offices or investors who are not technical, they don't have a PhD, how do they get comfortable, or what are the things they can do to get comfortable around that technicality piece of it?
Well, yeah, and I think one thing, and we've really embraced this because, I mean, we are the three of us, and particularly Luke, are very technical, but we don't know everything about everything. And so part of the way to do that is to be able to get very good at sort of consulting those that would have specialized expertise. You need a general level of base knowledge to invest in an industry because you just can't outsource the foundation. But one of the things we've done, and this is our approach at Deep Venture Partners too, is that we call it deep bench, which is this idea that you need in these areas like experts who understand not just the science, but like who are able to like understand the commercialization potential of it in lots of different areas. You come in with a base level of knowledge and you can get that, in 3 to 6 months in a field to sort of have a foundation. But then you basically just need a lot of people, a lot of experts who you can draw upon for very specific things, who can say, and some of those specific things are, one, is the science and technology behind this credible? 2, can the science and technology behind this like scale? And 3, does it actually solve a business or a customer problem or something else? And you can have a general sense of it yourself from just having worked in it, but like having 3 to 5 experts in an area is hugely helpful. And that's why we sort of built out this deep bench that can help us go into our core, areas of investment. And so for us, that means, of course, artificial intelligence, but transportation, robotics, industrial and manufacturing applications, climate. We have sort of the key people in each of those areas that we can go to kind of understand the edge cases better. And then we combine that with our base knowledge. Dan, other thoughts of just how to get yourself up to speed?
Yeah, I think surrounding yourself with experts in the field is very helpful, and I agree. I think a base knowledge is helpful, but for domain specific applications, nobody can be an expert on everything. And the fact is also, if you're working with people in your network who are experts, and you want to get into the very best deals, right? You want to get into the most compelling deals, possibly the hottest, possibly the most competitive deals. And so anytime you can advertise to a founder, it's a two-way relationship, right? The founder is pitching you, but you're also pitching the founder about why you should be allowed to invest compared to anybody else. And so if you have access to something special, some unique value add, which could be in the form of a person, with deep technical knowledge, could also be in the form of, relationships or potential customers or things like that. You always need to put your best foot forward to convince them that you have something special that will enable you to add value beyond just the cash itself.
But and so I think, I mean, what we spend, if you're just like, where do we spend our day, Amanda? What are we doing? It's a few things that take a lot of effort, but we think are totally worth it. Like one, we built software to track innovation at 1,000 research universities worldwide. So we're tracking it. A bit of that's public, but a lot of it's private information. So to do that, we have to like develop relationships with all of these universities, and not just the Stanfords and Harvards and MITs, but all over. And then two, we're actually building out relationships with all of these like world-class scientists in areas and constantly building out that team. So the idea is for us, what we do each day is track all of this university innovation all over, build relationships with the universities themselves and experts all over who can help us evaluate and be part of Deep Bench. And then three, add the time component of just other opportunities, things that are trending, new spaces that open up that seem really hot, great spaces where there's opportunity for follow-on investment. So if we're the first money in, there's a whole path there that it can continue to scale and grow. So all of that is happening. So that's why we think like this is the renaissance, but it's a global renaissance and it's happening in every scientific field. So you better be prepared to scale for that if you're an investor also. And so that's some of the value we hope we can add.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, we surround ourselves with people we know and trust and are experts in a variety of areas. And then together we can really evaluate lots and lots of things very effectively.
So 3 years from now, when we're having this conversation again in 2028, what will we be talking about and that we're not talking about today?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of interesting points on this one. So from a technological level, one of the themes that I think will increase in importance is consistency and interoperability between different AI systems. So right now, the infrastructure and landscape for exchanging information between multiple agentic stacks is fairly basic. And then also, when you type things into, ChatGPT or any of these platforms, if you type the same question at different times, you get different answers. Maybe not hugely different, but a little bit different. So, there's a bit of inconsistency in the platforms, which can be challenging for enterprises. But that's kind of at a technical level, and those things need to be addressed. But I think at a more human level, I'm also intrigued by the dynamic of AI agents, talking to each other and arguing with each other and trying to convince each other of things. And so there's going to be an exponential growth in chatter between computers talking to each other. And what I think is that will really dramatically increase human appreciation of other humans and authentic interpersonal connections. So I think I mentioned that earlier, but I think that's going to be a societal trend that we're going to see coming out of this.
I think just to chime in, just on something that's going to unlock tons of business and economic opportunity, like 3 years from now. I mean, I basically think the cost of running these complex queries is just going to dramatically drop. Like it's going to drop, and it's going to be, I don't know, 100x less than it is today. And so that's going to enable the ability, that combined with compute power, to do so many more things that everyone can do. So I think number one, we're going to see this dramatic reduction in cost as AI becomes more like just turning on the electricity or something like that for us for use. Two, I think you're going to see this ability for sort of AI to interact in the world. So just this going from, very, very limited interfaces, right? It's like a little chat window or something on a phone, or maybe now you can actually use your voice a little bit and talk to it, to something that just is out there in the world. And this sort of like, what it's going to do is it's going to combine the physical world with the digital world in ways that we haven't expected before, and be able to combine those in exciting ways. So I think we're going to see that. And then just on a personal note, or like a sort of a personal or worker or productivity note, this is just my personal belief, is that we're all going to have a digital twin. And that digital twin driven by AI is just our assistant, our helper that's going to help you with investments, that's going to help you with your everyday life and your family. And we're just going to have this like sort of alter ego. And what's going to happen in the world is everyone is going to be like gifted, I don't know, a $50,000 per year sidekick who is just designed to help you. And this is going to start in the developed world, and it's eventually going to go to the developing world, and it's going to transform everything. Just like the internet put information at your fingertips everywhere, suddenly we're all going to have our assistant who's trained on us, who knows how we work, who knows what we have to do, and everyone's going to be better as a result, I believe. Luke, what do you think? Science fiction or no? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure of the assistant, the one person, but I think it's going to be a bunch of agents. You'll have, a number of, you'll have your, investment advisor agent, you'll have your, cooking agent, you'll have a whole bunch of agents that know you and are specialized for these tasks and can talk to each other, right? As we talked about. So I think that's going to be more like the future that I think we're moving towards, but time will tell. And to build on what you said earlier and the compute cost dropping, I kind of agree. It will drop. Right now, it's actually rising because, the agent do more and more, and if you actually leverage an agent for your workflow, your costs are going to be significant. But over time, I think a lot of the AI will probably move to the edge, and every device we interact with, everything we do will have some sort of edge AI embedded. Right now, it's moving towards this, but, it will accelerate as a trend. And that as more and more AI gets done at the edge, probably some cloud compute costs will drop, and AI will be more embedded in everything you do. So that's I think what the future I envision, or at least I think is likely to materialize. Yeah,
and power consumption will skyrocket as well, mitigated by innovations in power consumption or in power generation. So, and obviously, nuclear energy stocks are skyrocketing right now, and there's a big push around that, along with quantum computing. But there's absolutely energy is going to be affected by this in some very interesting ways.
Interesting. Yeah, that's definitely worth another podcast. I'm very curious about how that's going to happen, for sure. Yeah, because I deal with real estate firms that are building, these big mega complexes, and it's fascinating. So my last question, and it's a long one, so I apologize for that, but I think it's really important because, Ben, Daniel, Luke, when I first met you guys, I was like, wow, you have these three really interesting, smart people who have been in the industry for a long time coming together to create this venture fund. So I'd love to hear about kind of the journey and that catalyst of like, aha, we got to do this because we're doing something right, something unique, something different. So I'd love to kind of hear about your backgrounds and your journey and kind of like why you three kind of meld together so well. So I'll leave it up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think our strength is our diversity from a background and perspective. So we all have prior backgrounds of working with each other. Ben and I were classmates at Harvard, and Luke and I used to work together as well at an AI company, and obviously we're all working together now and have been for a while. We have different backgrounds because Ben is a serial entrepreneur who founded two eight-figure revenue companies. He's an expert on commercializing university research, and he's worked with the U.S. Department of Commerce's Advanced Technology Program and the National Academy of Sciences Strategic Advisory Board. So that's his background. My background, I've got 10 years of venture capital experience here in Silicon Valley, most recently helping run a $500 million venture fund. I've had over a dozen exits, including various IPOs and acquisitions, and previously I worked at Benchmark Capital and served as founder and CEO of a startup that Benchmark backed. And Luke is the former VP of AI at Facebook, the founder of Google Street View, and the head of Lyft's self-driving division, and he's got over 100 patents in computer vision and AI. So we all have different things to bring to the table. Because we have this background of past and current collaboration, I think there's a mutual respect for our individual areas of expertise and strength. and we all kind of contribute different things. But I'll pause and let others
Well,
jump in.
but I think the thing, all of that stuff is true. But what actually I think is most notable for us is just we kind of dropped other things we were doing to all join forces on this in a big way, just because we're so excited. And it's because really, if you had a chance to, I mean, it's a different kind of renaissance. But if you were in, I don't know, if you were in Florence, Italy, back in the actual Renaissance, and you're like all this amazing creativity, and it's like Leonardo da Vinci is over there, and all of these great other people are over here, and you had a chance to like be a part of that and like sort of back all of that and bring it into the world, you'd be like, oh my God, this is an incredible experience. This is like a once in a lifetime experience. And I think all of us, we had a unique background and said, this is a once in a lifetime experience right now. I mean, the new world is being created. We cannot sit it out. We have some unique backgrounds to be able for us to capitalize on it. But if you want to like do good and do great in terms of investment, like there is no better time. You cannot sit this out right now. I don't know if you feel that way, Luke.
Yeah, totally. I think to me that, I've been doing investments as an angel investor and advisor to start for about 10 years, and seeing the way the board was being transformed with AI, and having spent some time again getting to know Dan at a past company, we thought timing was ideal and right to do something big and bigger and join forces and that new adventure with Deep Venture Partners. So there couldn't be a better time to do this.
Well, and then the other thing I think that is just notable about our team is just that the way that we've approached this is, yes, it's the three of us, but it's like all of our extended networks of scientists, of researchers, of entrepreneurs, of everything else. I mean, I think what is unique about our thesis is that we think, with the by focusing on university research and getting to technology at an earlier stage, we think you can win across multiple sectors because of the role that AI is playing. So I think what is unique about us was, we like to think we're pretty smart, Dan and Luke. But the other thing is that we basically said, if we could take an approach where right now, if we gather up through all of our networks, the smartest people we know and deploy them in this very focused way, then, the sky is the limit. And it's possible not just to do great in robotics or in transportation or in climate, but in all of those areas that are being impacted right now, there is no better time. So if you're going to be an investor and you're going to get that once in a lifetime shot in your career, we think it is now, and it is across multiple sectors, and it all starts at universities. And that's why we just can't sit this out.
Great. Fantastic. Okay. I'm going to ask a question that wasn't on our list, but if you could recommend a book, like get yourself smart on this space, like learn, like if someone asked me like, what, if for finance, what should someone read? And I would be like, read the Buffett letters. What would that book be for you around AI or tech?
My perspective is that if a book is written about AI, it might already be outdated.
Exactly.
Okay, got
It
it.
changes so fast. I think it's a good answer.
I can easily spend 4 hours a day just keeping up to speed with AI developments from newsletters going into my inbox. A book on AI is fine for kind of historical background, but otherwise, it's out of date.
Well, what I would say
That's
is
fair.
there's maybe but two resources. One, we actually do this podcast called Deep, which is on the emerging deep tech that will change the world. Every week we're interviewing a new Nobel Prize winner, top research scientist, or some kind of CEO or corporate leader. So one, that can be useful, and two, a couple other books that are just, I think, good for just grounding in the space. There's one like Why Machines Learn, the elegant math behind modern AI, and it just like helps you kind of get grounded in some of the math, and it's pretty good for like sort of a layman approaching it. Another one is Co-Intelligence, that I just think is like good for thinking about how AI can interact with us and how it's a partner in this, and how it's not so much of a question of like does AI replace humans, but like, how does it work together? So I think those are a couple of good things, but like, hopefully, every week on Deep, and you can just go to deepvp.com and you can get the podcast. It's also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're going to be talking about some groundbreaking technology, how it's going to change the world, and also how you can put your investor hat on and capitalize on it as an investor as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to join the Family Office Association audience to talk about AI. Really educational and thoughtful conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. And actually, I would say it is an incredibly exciting time to be a family office right now, because I think you have a chance to play a hugely important role and do great for your overall goals at the same time.